Well, Kelly's Court is back in session. On the docket today, seeing red over red light cameras. Folks in Chillicothe, Ohio are so outraged by the cameras in their town, they are ready to boot the entire city council who approved them. Legal challenges popping up in other towns as well, several of which have now been caught shortening the yellow light cycle intentionally because they wanted to increase ticket revenues. So are these things legal or not? Let's ask our panel, defense attorney Mark Eiglarsh and trial attorney Lee Armstrong. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, Lee, are they legal or aren't they?
Well, I'll tell you what's going on. The proponents of these things, and I'm not a proponent of them, the foundation of their argument is based on public safety. And I think what you're seeing is, for a long time, drivers were coming around and putting forth arguments, constitutional basis. I think courts were sidestepping them, saying we're dealing with tickets. But now, at this point, since the numbers aren't there, the statistics and the testing aren't bearing out that these cameras actually increase public safety, I think you're finding courts over and over again, just happened in Minnesota, where the Supreme Court struck down one of these red light cameras on constitutional grounds. And I think that's going to be the trend if the evidence doesn't come forward.
Yeah, Mark, the Minnesota Supreme Court saying these are unconstitutional because they deprive people of the right to confront their accuser, because they assume guilt as opposed to assuming innocence, which is the presumption in our law.
Right.
So are they onto something? Should they be struck not just in Minnesota but everywhere?
No, and what they specifically found in Minnesota was the way that they were carrying it out violated the Constitution. If there is a photograph taken of not only just the vehicle but of the driver, and they can match that to the person who's driving the vehicle, and they can send that person a citation, I'm in favor of it. And I disagree with Lee once again. I do think the statistics show, and common sense would dictate, that when drivers approaching a yellow light know that there will be adverse consequences, then they're going to slow down and stop. If they know that they can get away with it, they're going to go through the light. So it is a public safety
but what about
issue.
that, Lee? Because they ticket your car, they ticket the car, and not the driver. So if somebody else is driving your car is the one that gets the ticket, even if you weren't the driver. And as one lawmaker said, this is like convicting a gun for murder. Yeah,
even if your car is stolen, it's the same thing. And going back to there's a couple of things that Mark said just there. On the testing, it is not as logical or intuitive as Mark says. What they find is, Megan, when people approach that, I think they call it the dilemma zone. When you're right at the beginning of the intersection, you know that the camera is going to snap and people either speed up or they slam on their brakes. That causes more rear-end collisions. The numbers do not support what Mark's saying. And as far as the constitutional issues, as you pointed out before, what it does is it requires the owner to come forward and put forth evidence that the owner was in fact not driving it. That turns the presumption of innocence right on its head. That's the constitutional angle.
And I have a problem with that.
Go ahead, Mark.
I am not in favor of that. That is absolutely unconstitutional.
Yeah, but the photograph, Mark, the photograph,
continue that.
The photograph you're talking about, just if I can jump, the photograph you're talking about, that's in California. That's not in every state. California has a $350 ticket. And so there they put in these extra safeguards, I guess you would say,
well, then
by requiring a photograph.
If these cities...
Well,
if these cities want to raise those cherished revenues, then they need to invest in cameras that will take a picture of the driver so they can make sure that they match that up to the driver.
All right, Megan, let's talk about that.
But here's the problem. Here's the problem. Normally they contract these deals out to third parties who oversee the red light system or the speed cam system, and so there's not even a cop for you to cross-examine if you want to show up to defend yourself. It's just pay this fine or else.
The deck is so stacked. An average citizen...
Go ahead, Lee, and then Mark.
Okay, first of all, on the photo. Think about the photo. If that's the requirement in California, what do you think people are going to do to try to avoid the fact that they're going to be on camera? Put their hand up, put the visor down, more dangerous conditions. So, and an average person, Mark, I mean, think about it. How do you fight against a camera? You're going to bring an engineer in to come in and say, and an average citizen and say the transmission was faulty, or because of the angle of the sun that day, this wasn't my license plate. They're not going to do that. They just mail in the ticket. They pay the ticket, and that's
the problem. There's a presumption of guilt in this system, Mark.
It's not about public safety.
It's totally about revenue. That's why these cities are shortening the yellow light cycles, which is absolutely outrageous.
And that's
in California, Tennessee,
Megan.
Missouri, and other cities. I'll give you the final word, Mark.
That is reprehensible. I know why Mr. Speedy Gonzalez Armstrong wants it stopped.
It takes away the it takes away a God-given right to try to
tell my last word. This was my last word. My last word. Again, as long as there's procedural due process in place where people can fight it out in court, I'm in favor of it. It's good for public safety.
It's such a shock that he would defend cameras. This man loves the camera. Look at him. Look at that face. Look at the smile. That's unnatural.
Lee and Mark, thank you.
God bless you, Lee.
Gotta go. One final word for our viewers. These camera systems are flawed. Those ticketed have fewer means to challenge the tickets than those who are cited by the police. Moreover, there's a presumption of guilt, not of innocence. That's not fair, and there's a very good argument. It is not constitutional. We will be right back.